Imagine this: before Adam ever breathed, before Eden ever bloomed, before time as we know it was even counted, something existed. A world lost, buried not beneath dust, but beneath doctrine, hidden not by accident, but perhaps by divine design. The Bible begins with, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Simple, profound. But is it really the start? Welcome to Mind Manifestor. Today, we're diving deep into the ancient whispers between Genesis 1 verse 1 and Genesis 1 verse 2, into a silence so loud, it echoes through every page that follows. Because maybe, just maybe, the Bible doesn't open with creation but with something far more shocking, a cosmic aftermath. For generations, believers have read the opening verses of Genesis as the first chapter of everything. The heavens, the earth, life. But as soon as you turn the page, or even glance at the next line, something unsettling appears. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. That's not the picture of a fresh creation. That's wreckage. That's aftermath. In the original Hebrew, the words are tohu vabohu, terms that don't imply a blank canvas. They mean chaos, desolation, ruins. Elsewhere in the Bible, these words are used only in descriptions of divine judgment. Isaiah speaks of devastated lands. Jeremiah laments cities turned to dust. In every case, tohu vabohu means something has gone horribly, cosmically wrong. So, what happened? This is where the mystery known as the gap theory takes shape. An ancient idea suggesting that between Genesis 1 verse 1 and 1:2 lies the erasure of an entire world. Not a failure of God's power, but a consequence of rebellion, of something once glorious falling. And here's the fascinating part: this isn't just modern speculation. Early Jewish mystics, Christian theologians like Origen and Augustine, and even the overlooked Ethiopic biblical tradition all hint at this theory. In fact, some of the earliest interpretations of Genesis embraced the idea that the Bible begins after a catastrophe. Let that settle in. Pre-Adamic world. A civilization of divine order wiped out, not because God changed his mind, but because something ancient defied his will. And the result? Genesis opens not on a pristine planet, but on a war-torn, ravaged realm. Darkness covering the deep, the Spirit of God not creating, but hovering, watching, waiting, preparing to restore what was broken. If you've ever read the Bible and felt like something was missing, like there was a deeper layer just beneath the surface, you're not alone. And you're not wrong. Let's dive deeper. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 14 verse 33 that God is not the author of confusion. Yet Genesis 1 verse 2 is pure confusion, void, formless, and cloaked in shadow. That doesn't reflect divine design. It suggests interruption. Something came before, and it broke the divine rhythm, tore through heaven's harmony, and then silence. But not everything was lost. Among the earliest preserved scriptures, especially those found in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon, we discover texts that Western Christianity largely excluded. Books like Enoch and Jubilees. These aren't casual reads. These are revolutionary insights into the spiritual war before man was ever formed. In the Book of Enoch, we encounter stories of celestial beings, called the Watchers, sent to observe Earth. But they didn't just watch. They acted. They rebelled. They interfered with creation, crossing boundaries that were never meant to be touched. The world became corrupted not by man, but by angels. One name echoes through this shadowed history: Lucifer. Not merely a serpent, not just the tempter in Eden, but possibly the ruler of the world before Adam. Some ancient interpretations suggest Lucifer was once entrusted with Earth's care. A bearer of light, he stood radiant with power until pride consumed him. His rebellion, far from a moment in heaven, might have had devastating consequences here on Earth. And so, if Genesis 1 verse 1 speaks of the original creation, Genesis 1 verse 2 may be the aftermath of Lucifer's fall. The earth, once radiant, became a ruin, not empty because nothing had happened, but because everything had gone wrong. The phrase, "the Spirit of God hovered over the waters," now takes on new meaning. It's not about beginning, it's about reclaiming. A divine reset was underway. And that brings us to Eden. Most of us think of Eden as the start of human history. But what if it wasn't a beginning, but a restart? What if Eden wasn't placed in untouched nature, but into the last patch of purity after a celestial fallout? The implications are massive, because if Earth was judged before Adam, then we must ask, who or what was judged? Who were the inhabitants of that forgotten world? What did they do? And do any traces of them remain? Take a moment here. If you've been pulled into this cosmic mystery so far, now's the time to subscribe to Mind Manifestor. We're just getting started, and the revelations only go deeper from here. Now, back to the echoes of the old world. Let's return to those words, tohu vabohu. That same phrase is used in Jeremiah when he sees, in vision, the earth in ruins. But here's what Jeremiah adds. I beheld, and lo, there was no man. The implication, there had been people, or beings, but they were gone, erased, and only judgment remained. The gap theory doesn't conflict with Genesis. It fills in its haunting silence. It opens the possibility that Earth was once a realm of glory, perhaps governed by spiritual beings, angelic stewards placed to oversee the universe's early beauty. And it opens the door to one of Scripture's most provocative questions: what really caused the fall? Here's a thought that might keep you up tonight. What if the serpent in Eden wasn't a deceiver from outside, but a remnant of the world that came before? A survivor of the first rebellion, a being who once walked in divine light and now crawled through shadow. His temptation wasn't random, it was personal. It wasn't just about Eve, it was about taking back what was lost. Genesis becomes a second beginning, a response to something terrible. And Adam? He wasn't formed out of nothing. He was placed into something already steeped in spiritual history. The soil from which he was made may have once buried ancient ruins, perhaps even the bones of those who came before. When God breathed into Adam, it wasn't the first breath of life, it was the breath of restoration, a restart, the final sanctuary. Eden wasn't innocence, it was isolation, a divine quarantine to protect new humanity from old corruption. And now, imagine what secrets lie in the forbidden books. The Book of Enoch, for instance, doesn't merely reference angels. It names them. It details their rebellion, their punishment, and the hybrid offspring, the Nephilim. It speaks of heavenly laws, cosmic boundaries, and forbidden knowledge. Metallurgy, enchantments, warfare, all passed from angels to humans. A corruption not of the body alone, but of spirit, culture, and destiny. The Bible, it seems, doesn't start with a clean slate. It begins with war, and what comes next will challenge everything you thought you knew about giants, gods, and the real battle behind the scenes of Genesis. Stay with us, because what's coming next may shift your understanding of human origins forever. Imagine a race of beings so unnatural, so disruptive to the divine order, that the creator of the universe had only one option left: total reset. This wasn't just judgment, this was emergency containment. The question is, what made them so dangerous? They were giants, yes, but their danger wasn't measured in feet or inches. It was far deeper, embedded in their very DNA. These beings, known as the Nephilim, were living violations of the boundaries set by heaven. According to Genesis 6 verse 4, there were Nephilim in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. This wasn't poetry. It was genealogy. These were the offspring of a forbidden fusion. Not angels, not humans, something in between, and never meant to exist. The term Nephilim is derived from the Hebrew root NPL, meaning to fall. They were literally the fallen ones, manifestations of rebellion made flesh. Not fallen like Lucifer in metaphor, but fallen in essence. They were the genetic result of divine beings, the Watchers, interbreeding with mortal women. This act wasn't just a mistake. It was a calculated violation of the natural order. And what followed was terrifying. These hybrids weren't simply large. They were godlike in stature, terrifying in presence, and corrupted in purpose. They weren't born out of love or natural union, they were designed. engineered with one mission: to rewrite humanity, to infiltrate and infect the bloodline that was meant to carry the image of God. Genesis 6 verse 11 reveals the consequences. The earth was filled with violence. But that word, violence, is translated from the Hebrew chamas, which doesn't just mean aggression. It means lawlessness, utter moral breakdown, a corruption that was so complete, it couldn't be fixed. These Nephilim were not just conquerors, they were contaminators. Their very existence polluted the earth. Humanity wasn't just falling into sin, it was being overwritten. This is why Genesis 6 verse 9 says Noah was perfect in his generations. The Hebrew term used is tamim, a word later used to describe animals that were spotless, acceptable for sacrifice. This doesn't just imply moral righteousness. It suggests genetic integrity. Noah and his family were untainted, free of Nephilim corruption. Which brings us to a revelation many readers of Scripture overlook. The flood wasn't just a reaction to wickedness. It was a desperate move to preserve purity. God wasn't simply judging sin, he was isolating an infection. Earth had been turned into a battleground for genetic warfare, and the only solution was a divine reset. Genesis 6 verse 7 records God's heartbreaking decision. I will wipe mankind from the face of the earth. This wasn't rage. It was grief, the voice of a creator watching his masterpiece mutate beyond recognition. So the ark wasn't just a boat. It was a biological vault, a floating sanctuary, a mobile Eden carrying the last uncorrupted strands of human DNA and original creation. Only those untouched by the Nephilim seed were brought aboard. Animals, too, were chosen not just for reproduction, but for restoration. Everything was handpicked for a second beginning. But the story doesn't end there, because even after the rain stopped and the waters receded, something survived. That haunting phrase from Genesis 6 verse 4, and also afterward, changes everything. It means the Nephilim returned. Despite the flood, the corruption found a way back. How? That remains one of Scripture's most unnerving mysteries. Some speculate it came through the wives of Noah's sons, possibly carrying dormant Nephilim genetics. Others suggest a second incursion, a renewed rebellion by the Watchers or similar beings who again broke divine laws. The Bible doesn't lay it all out, but the hints are unmistakable. Take the Book of Numbers. Giants appear again, like Og of Bashan, whose bed was over 13 feet long. Then there's Goliath, the towering Philistine warrior whose heritage echoes the same ancient bloodlines. These were not isolated mutations. These were remnants of a previous age, echoes of rebellion still walking among men. And these beings weren't just physical anomalies, they became legends. Ancient civilizations worshipped them. They were remembered as gods by the Greeks, as titans, as demigods. Pagan temples were built in their honor. Myths were formed around their power. But their origin was always the same: rebellion against heaven's structure. Their impact didn't stop at genetics. Their legacy permeated cultures, shaped wars, inspired monuments. They became symbols of power, dominion, and forbidden knowledge. The Nephilim weren't merely erased, they were mythologized. And here's where the story takes a darker turn. The flood wasn't just rain. It was divine warfare. Genesis 7 verse 11 says, "The fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of heaven were opened." This wasn't a gentle cleansing. This was cosmic devastation. Water from above and below colliding, not as nature but as judgment. Mountains disappeared. Entire cities sank. Names were lost. Histories buried. At the heart of this chaos floated the ark, a beacon of what once was, a vault of divine design. Inside were just 8 souls: Noah, his wife, his sons, and their wives, all untouched by the Nephilim strain. Not random survivors, chosen vessels. And again, Noah is described as blameless in his generations. Tamim, pure, uncorrupted, prepared. Because this wasn't just about saving humanity, it was about protecting the lineage through which the Messiah would one day come. God was not simply restarting, he was preserving a promise. But that chilling phrase remains. And also afterward, the Nephilim came back. And if they returned, what else did? Ancient ruins across the world speak to something older than what we're taught. Megalithic structures no one can explain. Technologies that seem out of time. Civilizations erased before history even begins. In Ethiopian tradition, home to some of the oldest biblical texts, there are stories of post-flood hybrids, of kings who lived for centuries, of mountains hiding divine relics. The Book of Enoch, preserved in that canon, issues a stark warning. The watchers, though imprisoned, will rise again. Their chains are not forever, which means the flood wasn't the end of the war. It was a pause, quarantine, a strategy, and what followed was not peace, but another chapter in a spiritual battle stretching across millennia. History moved on, but the war beneath it raged on, hidden behind myth, masked by time. From Babylon to Egypt, from the Greek gods to Norse legends, traces of this cosmic conflict echo through every civilization. What if the flood wasn't final? What if we're living in the aftermath of a story that never truly ended? Because if the Nephilim returned once, what's stopping them now? And what if the corruption didn't just survive? What if it adapted? What if it's hiding in plain sight? In the next revelation, we'll uncover the ruins that whisper of a world before ours. Megalithic monuments too precise for primitive hands, technologies that shouldn't exist, and the haunting question at the heart of it all. Are we the first, or just the latest? They left behind more than stories. Across deserts and jungles, beneath oceans and ancient cities, remnants still speak. The bones of a forgotten world, long buried, but never fully gone. Great civilizations, from Sumer to Egypt, from the Mayans to the Vedic sages, all tell the same tale. They speak of a radiant age before the flood, a time when godlike beings walked among humans, sharing forbidden knowledge, building wonders, shaping kingdoms. And then they fell. A catastrophic collapse. A divine judgment. Sound familiar? Even Plato echoed this pattern. In his telling of Atlantis, a majestic empire swallowed by the sea in a single day and night, we see the same structure. A golden era, then sudden ruin. Dismissed by many as myth, Atlantis may in fact be a fragmented memory, a human echo of something real, something older than we dare imagine. And here's the thing. While the Bible doesn't catalog these civilizations directly, it whispers about them in the gaps, in the pauses, in that chilling phrase, and also afterward. Genesis 6 verse 4 doesn't just record the presence of the Nephilim before the flood. It says they were there afterward. That's the key. That's the doorway to everything ancient cultures have been trying to tell us. Maybe the gods of Olympus, the titans of myth, the deified pharaohs of Egypt, they weren't inventions. Maybe they were Nephilim, survivors of the old world, worshipped by a humanity that had forgotten the truth. And if these stories hold truth, then what they left behind wasn't just legend, it was knowledge. Dangerous knowledge. The Book of Enoch, hidden for centuries and preserved in the Ethiopian tradition, describes how the Watchers taught humanity things they were never meant to know. Metallurgy, enchantments, astrology, weapons of war and manipulations of nature. These weren't primitive myths. They were downloads, direct transmissions of knowledge from beings who were never supposed to share it. And the cost was high. But let's return for a moment to the garden, to Eden. We often think of it as a peaceful oasis, a symbol of innocence and beauty. But what if Eden was far more than a garden? What if it was the seat of divine rule on earth? Not a park, but a palace. Not a grove, but a throne room. Ezekiel 28 describes Lucifer in Eden, not in the presence of trees, but surrounded by radiant stones, walking among fiery coals. That imagery is sacred, celestial, and political. It describes power, order, dominion. Eden wasn't just where man began. It was where heaven touched earth. So what happened to it? Was it destroyed? Or was it hidden? In the Ethiopian tradition, Eden isn't gone. It's veiled, guarded, kept from the unholy until the appointed time. This changes the question entirely. It's not where is Eden? It's who is allowed to return. Maybe the longing for paradise in every culture, every religion, isn't fiction, it's memory. deep cellular memory of a place we once knew, a home we were cast out from, a sacred space sealed, but not lost. And that's where the story gets personal, because the tale doesn't end with giants or floods or even Eden. It leads to dust, and to the one formed from it. Genesis 2 verse 7 says, "Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground." But what kind of dust? Not fresh, untouched soil, not pure beginnings. Remember, by Genesis 3 verse 17, the ground is already cursed. And maybe, just maybe, that curse didn't start with Adam's failure. What if the soil from which Adam was shaped already held the remnants of a fallen age? This would mean Adam wasn't made from nothing. He was molded from the ashes of rebellion, sculpted as a divine counterstrike, a reset, not just of flesh, but of intent. Romans 5 verse 14 says Adam was a type of the one to come. Prototype, preview. He was never the endpoint. He was the beginning of a plan that had already been set in motion, a plan of redemption, of reclamation. Think about the difference. When God created animals, he spoke them into existence. But with Adam, he formed him by hand and breathed into him. That breath wasn't just about life. It was about authority, representation, purpose. Adam was not just placed in Eden to enjoy it. He was assigned to guard it, govern it, restore it. Eden wasn't just a paradise. It was a battlefield, a front line, and Adam was the first defender. His mission wasn't agricultural, it was spiritual. His calling was warfare, to stand between God and a realm still echoing with ancient whispers, to confront the same beings who once ruled the earth, the same fallen spirits, the same serpent, not a new enemy, but an old exile. In Ethiopian texts, Adam is portrayed not just as man, but as priest and king, a cosmic mediator. Eden was his temple, his throne, his charge. But Adam failed. He doubted. He listened. He fell. And his failure wasn't just exile from a garden. It was the reopening of a war. But the plan never depended on him alone. God knew. The first Adam was never the solution. He was the starting point, the blueprint, the model for someone greater. The Bible calls Jesus the last Adam. 1 Corinthians 15 verse 45 declares, "The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit." Jesus wasn't a backup plan. He was the goal, the fulfillment, the answer to a rebellion that began before time. Where Adam fell, Jesus stood. Where Adam hid, Jesus surrendered. Where Adam unleashed death, Jesus became death to bring life. The serpent who once whispered in Eden now faced the cross. And at that moment, everything turned. Redemption wasn't just personal, it was cosmic. Romans 8 verse 22 says, "All of creation has been groaning, waiting, watching, hoping to be set free from corruption." Because this wasn't just about humanity. It was about restoring what had been lost, what had been broken, what had been sealed. And now the story shifts once again to you. Yes, you. Because this isn't just ancient history. It's prophecy. And you're living in its fulfillment. Ephesians 6 verse 12 reminds us that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. This battle isn't against people. It's against principalities, powers, spiritual forces of darkness. This is the same war, the same rebellion, the same ancient evil still whispering, still watching, and still opposing. But you weren't born into this moment by accident. You were born into the final chapter. You're not just a reader of prophecy. You are a participant in it. The Ethiopian Bible says Christ didn't just die to redeem us. He came to reopen Eden. The gate once sealed, once guarded by blazing swords, now stands open to those made clean. Revelation 22 verse 14 says, "Blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have the right to the tree of life." That's your invitation. Jesus didn't just come to get you into heaven. He came to bring heaven back to earth, to restart communion, to restore the kingdom, to reclaim territory. And you, yes, you have a role in that mission. So rise. You were not made for chaos. You were chosen for restoration. You are not too late. You are not forgotten. You are part of the story. Because the war is real, the kingdom is coming, and Eden is waiting. And this is only the beginning. If you've made it this far, then you're already one of us. You're seeking truth beyond the surface. You feel the echo. You hear the call. So stay with us. Like, comment, and subscribe to Mind Manifestor, where the ancient meets the eternal and forgotten knowledge is reborn. In our next video, we'll decode the symbols hidden in ancient ruins and unveil how modern humanity might be walking the same path as the world before the flood. Don't miss it.